This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Economics. Everyone has questions about their farm. From general inquiries to in-depth fertilizer questions, find straightforward answers at nutrien-economics.com.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Monday edition of the show. Hello, October! Wow. Goodbye, September. Hello, October. And now we can really say, even though like a week ago it was officially fall, yeah, fall is definitely here, as we saw some frost in certain parts of Alberta on the weekend. So yeah, it's wow, October already. Before you know, we'll be talking about November. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday, and of course, big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. Now, today's Agronomic Monday. Of course, as always, we're joined by Peter Wee Pete Johnson. He's in the field today doing a bunch of field work. So I think he's parked on the side of the field and he's going to join us. So looking forward to having that the conversation about agronomy with him. I got a bunch on my list. Okay. I've got Kochia gaining acreage in the west, unfortunately. We've got some pretty amazing soybean yields that we're going to talk about being seen in some parts of Canada, but also in the U.S. 100 bushels an acre in some fields. We got a tweet to talk about. We're also going to talk about farm safety related to a combine fire that I saw over the weekend, and we're going to talk about some of the soil moisture needs that we have here in Western Canada. We're also going to hear today from Derek and Tannis Axten. Now, they are featured in a new soil school episode that I shot on their farm. And I had the privilege of visiting their farm in Minton, Saskatchewan, back in, I believe it was July when I was there. And very, very cool stuff. Some great footage in that video. We're going to hear the audio of that today and talk about how their farm theme, their tagline, their motto, their mission is to be loyal to the soil. So Derek and Tannis Axten doing some really, really cool stuff there in southern Saskatchewan. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, sorry, not Twitter, X. I forgot to make that switch. And we are Real Agriculture on all of them. Or, of course, you can call the RealAg feedback line. The number is 855-776-6147. I do want to mention there's a really cool agronomist happening tonight. So Agronomist is our weekly RealAg and Primetime show hosted by Lindsay Smith, where we focus on key agronomic topics. And a very cool topic here tonight, 8 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Mountain at realagriculture.com/live or on our YouTube channel. And that is droning on seed and fertilizer. Very cool. Now, in a really, really wet sort of year, there's a lot of application here. And I think just in any sort of year, when it comes to kind of the future, and a lot of focus on drones, a lot of interest in terms of drones doing not only a lot of scouting, which we're kind of there already in many ways in some applications, but what about like things like spraying, or like they're going to talk tonight, seed and fertilizer? Very, very cool stuff. I'm looking forward to it. Of course, it's hosted by Lindsay Smith, and I think our guests tonight are Ruben Stone and Felix Weber. So very, very cool. That's going to be a great show. You can participate live. And of course, you can also get CCA and CU credit. So if you've not checked out The Agronomist, you can definitely find that on YouTube, or there's also a podcast posted as well. So you can listen to the show while you're ripping up and down the field in your combine. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, let's get to Agronomic Monday. Peter Wee Pete Johnson is up first right after this.
The Your Co-op Grow Team are your local experts because we live here too. Our agronomic specialists stay up to date with the latest research and technology to help support your entire farm operation. Talk to our team for advice tailored to your farm's needs. We have recommendations to help you optimize your crop yield and quality while enhancing the health of your land. Co-op. We're all growing together. Here for your farm. Here for your family. Learn more at coop.crs/farm.
CDC Endure is a new oat line from Alliance Seed. High yielding with excellent disease resistance and the quality end users ask for, all in one great oat variety. CDC Endure provides the high beta-glucan levels to make heart-healthy products like breakfast cereals. For more information on CDC Endure oats, as well as any other products from Alliance Seed, check out allianceseed.com or visit any Alliance Seed authorized retailers.
Protecting your nitrogen is smart. And a nitrogen granule with a polymer coating that releases in response to conditions that promote plant growth? Well, that's me. I'm the environmentally smart nitrogen granule that gives the nutrition crops need when they need it, reducing nitrogen loss and increasing nutrient availability. Imagine feeding me to your fields. Me. Now, wait a minute. Hey, can I rethink this? ESN Environmentally Smart Nitrogen Fertilizer. Learn more at smartnitrogen.com.
Let's get rolling here with Agronomic Monday. We're joined right now by Pete Johnson. Pete, how's it going?
It's going awesome, thanks, Shaun. We are hard at harvest. We are planting wheat despite the fact that the stinking market for wheat, and there's been some comments on Twitter that the wheat market is not driving us to put wheat in the ground. And my response to that, well, neither is the corn market driving you to plant corn or the soybean market driving you to plant soybeans. They're all in the sewer, but we are going gangbusters here in Ontario, and it's a great place to be.
Well, that's good to hear. Yeah, if you missed my conversation with Tyler Schau from agmarket.net last week, I think it was on Wednesday's show, we talked about the wheat market, more specifically the spring wheat market, but I think the overall wheat complex fits into that discussion. Not very bullish. Not. More on the bearish side.
Thanks for that, Shaun.
Yeah, well,
thanks.
I hate to jump pound on that one. Hey, Pete, imitator stabilizer products claim dual protection, but do they actually deliver? Not so sure about that. Defend your UAN from nitrogen loss with Tribune nitrogen stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services, offering superior above and below ground protection. See how others stack up at defendyourn.ca. Well, people are trying to put wheat in the ground out east, and we're starting to see some soybeans coming off, of course, and we still await that monstrous potential corn yield that I've been hearing so much about. Out west, harvest progressing at very, very rapid pace. I don't have the Saskatchewan harvest numbers in front of me, but we're like 90+% complete on harvest. We're the 5 and 10 year averages are more like in the 70s. So definitely harvest is way ahead of normal. It's amazing how fast the fall goes here, Pete.
Yeah, well, and that's awesome because it gives growers another opportunity to get out there, do some fall weed control. Shaun, you and I have talked about that lots, but don't forget to get out there if you can. And for the growers everywhere that are hard at harvest, the other thing that you just always got to hammer on is please be safe. I know people are working long hours through harvest, and it's kind of just always come back to the think twice before you act, because just don't want anybody getting hurt.
Well, and speaking of that, I saw a tweet on Sunday from Manitoba farmer Tobin Dick, and Tobin had video of, what he says in the tweet is, last night our combine caught fire while my dad was at the helm. He saw the flame, turned away from the crop, and got out in time. He is safe. It was a terrifying sight as I returned to the field with the grain truck working title of footage is A Case of the Crispies. Hey, so he's able to take some humor in it, but the combine completely burnt up. Glad to hear, Tobin, that your dad got out safe. Terrifying experience, I am sure. So yeah, Pete, even here in October, I think of combine fires more in the August time frame, but even here in October, we still got to be careful.
Well, absolutely. And I think it all comes down to how dry is the crop. And if the crop is dry and you get that spark, man, things can go up just so fast. The whole field could go. Thankfully, they got turned away from the crop, and I don't know, soybean harvest. I finished my own soybeans, Shaun, and I hate soybeans because not only do they not have a root system, but soybean dust is just brutal and it gets everywhere. And all it takes is, some of that soybean dust drop on the muffler, the exhaust manifold, something like that. And if there's any oil leak or anything around there, things can go south in such a hurry. So pay attention, keep things clean as much as you can, and just be safe.
I think, rye dust and like triticale dust is brutal. It's like triticale dust just clings to that combine. It's really bad. Having that air compressor in the field to blow that machine off, whether you got to do it just once a day or a couple times a day, not a bad practice when you're really seeing some of that buildup for sure. Now, Pete, you're out in the field. What are you doing? Are you trying to get wheat in the ground, or are you doing some other activities?
Oh, Shaun, you would have to ask, wouldn't you? So yes, Wheat Pete, as much as he used to be Peter No-Till, and I still am, don't do tillage. I had to work my soybean stubble with an RTS because that stinking, and Warren, I hope you're not listening, Warren Schneckenberger, because you'll beat up on me again. But that stinking old 9500 John Deere combine that I run, man, when they built that combine, they did not even care about residue spread patterns. I have done everything to that straw chopper. I put in new knives. I put in new hammers. I keep the knives right in. I run it as fast as I can possibly run it. And it sort of throws chunks of soybean straw out here and out there and out the next spot. And I have an air reel, like it feeds in the front perfect. It does not come out the back end perfect. And I went to drill into that, and it's like, yeah, we are just going to have a nightmare here because anyway, so we are RTSing soybean residue so that I can do a good job of planting wheat. Thank goodness that there's no rain in the forecast, that I can get the extra day to actually do that, because it's not my first choice. But Shaun, if anybody out there has a used Redicop straw chopper at a reasonable price that would fit on the back of a 9500 combine, call me. I want to buy it. Oh,
well, you know what,
brutal.
Pete? You've given the audience here on RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com, you've given us a lot. So it's time for the audience to step up and help Pete out here. Okay? So if you do have one, please put him out of his misery. Please, this is not good. So if you do have a used one, make sure you reach out there, RealAg audience. Indeed. Now, Pete, you mentioned fall weed control, and we heard it last week on the Farmer Rapid Fire. Corey Leeson from Radisson, Saskatchewan was on, and he was talking about having to now deal with kochia. Wasn't previously in his area, and now it's coming in to his fields, and super concerned about it. I heard about this also from an Edmonton farmer earlier this year, saying, we used to never have kochia here, and here it is. And this is, I'm in Southern Alberta, so we've been fighting kochia forever, and there is glyphosate resistance on kochia, so this is not a good situation, and growers are definitely going to be as proactive as possible, because that stuff grows in any conditions, it seems.
Yeah, so it's not just kochia here in Ontario. We're seeing water hemp spread further. I have water hemp in my area now. This is the first year that we realized it's on a neighbor's farm. So, like, weeds spread, but what's really interesting is that it seems as we get warmer, that some of these weeds are able to move into areas where they previously just were not adapted. And so whether the weed itself is changing a bit genetically, because the weed wants to spread. That's what it wants to do. Absolutely. But problem weeds just get to be a wider area problem all the time. You look at fleabane here in Ontario, man, it didn't take it any time to get from Essex County, where it started, all the way out to Eastern Ontario and even into Quebec. It's brutal from that standpoint. And kochia, it's a tumbleweed. It's moving whenever the wind can blow. And if you don't stay on top of it, all of these weeds have tremendous propensity to develop resistance. Anything that has a high level of seed return, and so that's kochia, that's water hemp, that's palmer, amaranth, like they just, something you got to keep fighting. And I think, Shaun, what's really key here is know that you have it. So you see that weed in your field and you say, I haven't seen that weed before. For goodness sakes, make sure that you identify it. And if it is kochia, or if it is, some weed you haven't had before that is a bad weed in other areas, get rid of it and mark the spot and kind of say, okay, we gotta pay attention here and not let it spread across every acre if you can at all. It comes down to this management. And that's what's going to make the difference between good weed control and poor weed control in the future.
Yeah. And, the other thing I'd like to see this fall, I'll be honest, the more and more producers, especially in Alberta, parts of Saskatchewan that I talk to, maybe outside of the Edmonton area, we need some moisture, man. Like, just, we're back. There was hope at the beginning of 23 that we're off to a better start in different parts, especially in parts of Saskatchewan. We're just right back where we were. The pasture conditions, the majority of them in the province of Saskatchewan, not in the best of shape. I feel like we haven't had a torrential downpour in southern Alberta forever. We need some rain this fall, man. It's brutal.
Yeah, well, and it's not just Alberta or Western Canada. I know I talked to some growers in Montana that are struggling. Even down into Kansas, some of the growers there are saying, thank goodness there's rain in the forecast, because the winter wheat planted desperately needs moisture to get it out of the ground. And then you come to Eastern Canada, particularly into Ontario, and you say, Ontario gets on average 35 inches of rain a year. How in the world could it ever be dry? You go east of Toronto and growers cannot find moisture. Eric at Napanee, 43 days with no rainfall. So the soybean crop was still growing at the end of that 43 days. They've just harvested the crop. So it was sucking moisture like crazy. No rainfall. And Eric says nothing's going to grow till it rains, except he's put in some irrigation, if you can imagine that, in Ontario on heavy clay soil. He's right by Lake Erie, so he's able to Lake Ontario is able to pull water out. And so 70% of his winter wheat this fall is going to get a pass with the irrigation gun just to get the stupid stuff to germinate.
Yeah. And we did have some rain on Saturday, but we need a whole lot more. Like, we're such in a depleted reserve situation that we just need a really, we got to get the sugar beets off, and that's kind of started. And obviously potatoes are going strong, but once all of this wraps up, corn silage, we need if it rained for a month, I would absolutely be doing the big dance indeed. Okay, let's take a break. We got more to discuss here with Peter Weepy Johnson when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, and it is Agronomic Monday.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground, we are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup, weed control, field trial results, yield strategies, and so much more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF, Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest podcast today.
As a grower, you spend a lot of time focused on the details. And sometimes it's only after harvest that you can step back and see the bigger picture. At AGI, we spend a lot of time focused on details too, making sure you can store your grain how you need to and move it when you need to. Learn more at aggrowth.com.
Let's keep rolling here on Agronomic Monday. Our guest is Peter Pete Johnson. You know, Pete, when I think about the characteristics of a really good friend and somebody you can rely on, I think of somebody that's genuine. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, yes.
Well, that is right. Nothing beats genuine. Your equipment is no different than your friends. New Holland genuine lubricants are the only lubricants engineered, tested, and proven for New Holland equipment. When your performance is at stake, always keep it genuine. Visit your New Holland dealer to learn more. As I mentioned, we're talking to Peter Pete Johnson. Pete, I got to talk about these soybean yields. And here's what's this blew me away. Shay Falk, who farms in Illinois, okay, tweeted a video of 100 bushel soybeans. Now, that was, he says below, it was on about, the whole field did about 80. The whole field did about 84. And about 25% of it did 100. That's amazing on soybeans.
That is absolutely incredible. And by the way, I saw that tweet, and I'm going like, why can't I do that? Oh my gosh! But I got to say, Shaun, that here in Ontario, we can actually match Shay's yields in certain areas. So I am astounded by the numbers that I am hearing come out of Eastern Ontario. There are field average yields there that are breaking 80 bushels per acre. The yield monitor is absolutely hanging up around 100 bushels per acre in the better parts of the field. I'm not sure it's 25% of the field, but we're there. And that's in an area that often has struggled to get much past 50 or maybe 60 bushel per acre, but they've had just the perfect weather. And yeah, that's incredible. Now, I got to be really careful because, Shaun, it is not that way in all of Ontario. And even in Eastern Ontario, where they did not control white mold, believe it or not, we have field yields because of too much rain and too heavy pounding rains here in the deep southwest of under 20 bushels per acre. I've heard as low as 17. And in Eastern Ontario, where these good fields are breaking 80, yeah, if you didn't control white mold and you have a variety of soybeans that is highly susceptible to white mold, some of those field yields, instead of breaking 80, or maybe they would have only made 60, but still they're under 25. And you just go, wow, talk about a disease being devastating. That's it.
And it's like this balance. If you got white mold, you got some yield, right? But you don't want too much white mold. And what we've heard from growers in the past couple weeks in regards to their soybean crop and white mold is in some of these areas pretty impacted. Like even where they've had the fungicide application, it's held that white mold back somewhat to a certain extent, but they still have white mold. Like we aren't able to totally prevent it. It does show the kind of the value of the fungicide at the right timing, trying to hold that disease back from, because imagine if they didn't use the fungicide, then you really would have a lot of infestation.
Yeah, 100%. And by the way, here in southwestern Ontario, and again, we talked about these weeds that are moving around, right? Man, in southwestern Ontario, in the soybean crop, it's pretty rare anymore that we seem to end up with really heavy white mold pressure in any given field. I will in edible beans, totally different game. But soybeans, can we get white mold? Yes. Are there a few soybean fields out there on muck soil or maybe with lots of manure where they're highly susceptible to white mold, where we get bad white mold? Sure. But man, we had some white mold this year and we had the rainfall. We should have had lots, but it really wasn't impactful for, I'll say, 90% of the soybean fields in southwestern Ontario. You go to Eastern Ontario, It's always a problem out there. And so if you have a white mold prone field, they are doing everything they can. It's not just fungicides. They are reducing their seeding rate. They're going to 30-inch rows, even though the data clearly shows 30-inch rows. If you don't have white mold, you get less yield on average. There's always exceptions, but on average, so we don't really want to go to 30-inch rows, but we have to control the white mold. So it's pick the right variety. That's the other thing that's really challenging. I know Greg at Black Creek Research just does a super job, and he's showing me pictures where white mold pressure and the good varieties just stand out because they're just that much better. So there's many things you can do, and it's 2 fungicides, right? It becomes a very expensive process. It's 2 fungicides, not 1 in those really white mold prone fields. So she's an expensive game, but 80 bushel soybeans, that pays for a lot of stuff.
Well, and here's the key too, that it's a part of this discussion is we're looking at some of the yield monitors, and I've seen yield monitor videos or pictures on social media where there's, to the high, like, we just saw there where it's 100 plus bushel soybeans. I've also seen where people have tweeted pictures of their yield monitor in the drought zone of Western Canada where, they're figuring out their yield as how many times the seeding rate, what they got off of the crop, which is, that's a terrible situation. Make sure your yield monitor is calibrated. Because all of these, crap in, crap out, right? When it comes to the data, if we are going to be making decisions off of these fields, make sure the yield monitor is calibrated.
Well, and Shaun, it's not just like you got to take it an extra step even beyond that, because you actually have to calibrate the yield monitor at different moisture contents because it's an impact sensor. And so if you're running, corn is the prime example. You're running corn at 30% moisture. Those kernels are soft. And so when they hit the impact sensor a whole bunch at once, they kind of cushion the blow versus you get to 20% moisture and then they're hard. And so you got to do different moisture contents, but you also, if you're going to change varieties or hybrids, and I don't care what crop it is, canola, wheat, triticale, corn, soybeans, the pericarp of that kernel and the density of that kernel also make a huge impact on just how hard they hit that impact sensor. And so we've seen lots of times on corn where the yield can be equal when you put it through the weigh wagon, but 2 different hybrids and different waxiness on the kernel, different moisture content maybe, and dang it, the yield monitor says there's a 30 bushel per acre yield difference. You run it through the weigh wagon, it's 0. So yeah, you got to calibrate, and you have to do it at different speeds, at different moistures, and like it takes work to do a really good job to have decent faith that your yield monitor is accurate.
Yeah, and the other thing you reminded me of is also, just like we say, get out of that tractor seat at planting and seeding time to have a look at depth, right? At harvest time, absolutely. Get out of the seat and check out your losses, because markets had some struggles as of late. So some of this crop isn't worth as much as it was, say, 12 months ago, but it's still worth a lot, and every little bit counts. And you have, unexpected or unplanned losses compared to what you put in as sort of an optimal amount, and that adds up over 1 acre to as many as you're farming. So manage those harvest losses.
Yeah, 100%, man. She's worth 0 if it's laying on the ground. So the combine's driving over the field anyway. You might as well get it in the bin. You just got to keep doing that. And things change, right? Like it always astounds me how we started, I don't know, whatever, let's say 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock in the morning, and straw's a bit tough, and you're having to hit it harder or speed the rotor up or slow it down or whatever you have to do to make it work there. And then at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you go look out the back and it's like, oh my gosh, I should have been backing off or speeding up or doing whatever, because it just thrashes differently. And then sometimes a lot of grain can go at the back. These new combines, they're pretty cool because they'll actually make those adjustments for you. A lot of them now, they just have sensors and they've got it figured out. But if you're an old guy like Wheat Pete and you're an old piece of junk from 1995, you better make sure you're looking.
But to that point though, Pete, even on some of the newer machines, like, yeah, they do have the auto adjustment and the auto settings of the combine are perfect for someone like me that has no clue what they're doing when they're setting a combine. I was always awful at it. You know, it's still good though to do that verification. Like, don't just trust and be like, well, okay, the machine knows what it's doing. Like, get out and check, right? Like, you know, do those counts on something like the harvest loss to really kind of make sure that what you think is happening is actually happening. And like you said, there's changes. You know, setting that thing at noon is different at 9 o'clock at night as we start to get, you know, night setting in and the humidity changing and it's a big difference. At least it can be, especially if there's no wind blowing. So it's definitely a good reminder to definitely do that for sure. Hey, I know you wanted to hit on FOSS on wheat.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we've talked about this lots, right, Shaun? But Dave Hooker tweeted out. So Dave farms, Dr. Dave from Ridgetown campus, University of Guelph. He's just such a smart guy. He farms as well, which is awesome because it keeps him honest and, you know, he puts his money where his mouth is. He's like me. Phosphorus with wheat seed is just, it's got to be part of the program, but he doesn't have a split box drill. So he blends the MAP, the 1152-0, with the wheat seed, and he tweeted out this picture of that. He was no-tilling, and he said, you know, this is awesome. It's September. It's phosphorus with the wheat seed. It's no-till. Like, everything is just optimum for me planting this wheat. And a whole bunch of people have never heard of blending MAP with wheat seed and had all these questions. Like, how does that, are you doing that to get better distribution of the seed in the row, or doesn't it settle out? And Dave did a really nice job, you know, basically saying it doesn't settle out, and you would think it would, but it's really about particle size and particle density. So the wheat is a bigger kernel than the MAP, and typically if the density is all the same, the bigger kernels go to the bottom and the smaller ones would rise to the top. So you'd think, well, then the wheat's going to settle down because the MAP is smaller. But no, the MAP particle is actually denser than the wheat kernel. And so a smaller but denser little granule in there. And the way it works out, they just never seem to separate. I've almost never had that problem. We've been doing this since 1988. I had an agronomist from New York State asked me about, like, how long can you leave it blended? And what about salt injury? And if the MAP isn't dusty and it's dry, the wheat seed is dry and the MAP is dry, we've had it together for a significant amount of time, never had a problem. On the other hand, if you just put the treatment on the wheat seed and it's dusty MAP, we've wrecked the germ on that wheat seed within 2 days. So only in my career twice have I had a problem with the blend, but you can wreck it if you try hard enough. But man, it's just a cool process and it really works well.
Hey Pete, we're out of time. I know we got to get you back to the tractor there and do your work on that trash that you seem to be mismanaging. So I'll let you get back to that and try to fix it so you can get that wheat in the ground, because timing is important with wheat planting. So I don't want to take up any more of your time. Thanks so much for joining us here this week, Pete.
Hey, thanks for having me, Shaun, as always. And hopefully we can chat again next week and I can say, yes, somebody sold me a Redekop chopper.
That is fantastic. That is Peter Wheat Pete Johnson. Make sure you listen to Wheat Pete's Word. New episode drops every single Wednesday of that podcast. Pete answers your agronomic questions. Okay, when we come back on RealAg Radio, we're going to hear all about a farm in Saskatchewan that is loyal to the soil. More about that when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
Dedication. Watching the sunset over your crop is one of life's simple pleasures. The anticipation of it all. We know that feeling. Introducing our new Airflex NXT, our best honeybee header yet with the closest cut ever. Light, fast reacting, and infinitely adjustable. More yield, less time and work. Airflex NXT focuses on the future. What drives your next? Visit honeybee.ca or contact your nearest Honeybee dealer.
When it comes to your farm, you demand performance, because what goes in determines what comes out. At Pride Seeds, we deliver on performance. With best-in-class corn hybrid seed, you'll see results when it comes to premium yields in all the ways that matter. Moisture, nutrition, dollars per acre, and of course, tonnage. So discover your farm's advantage, the Pride Seeds advantage. Visit your local dealer or prideseeds.com today.
This past summer, I had a really, really great week. It was in July, where I basically went across southern Saskatchewan and then down into Montana and then into central Montana. I saw a whole bunch of ground. There was a lot of miles put on that week doing the big loop, and it was a great time. And we're going to hear one of the interviews that I had done on that trip in a second. But first, I want to tell you about Alliance Seed and CDC Endure Oats. Top yields, excellent disease resistance, and the quality end users ask for in one great oat variety. CDC Endure is available through Alliance Seed authorized retailers, so make sure you check that out. Okay, like I said, big road trip. One of my stops was in Minton, Saskatchewan. That's right, just above the Montana border, below Weyburn. And boy, it was great. I stopped at the Axtens, Derek and Tannis Axten, and I had a lovely afternoon. It was really, really great. Really, they were great hosts, and they are doing some really innovative things on the farm. The processing plant that they have built is we're going to have Derek and Tannis on sometime to talk about that. Very, very cool stuff. Really top notch. Absolutely amazing. But I was there to shoot a couple different videos. One of them was a soil school, which you can find at RealAgriculture.com or on our YouTube channel. The soil school is brought to you by the Mosaic Company. And why we had the Axtens for a soil school episode is that soil health and soil improvement and just that whole area is really, really the lifeblood of what they do on their farm. They do a lot of innovative stuff, as you're going to hear that Derek and Tannis talk about. But they're so into it. You know, there's saying it and there's kind of like living it. You know what I mean? Like, you know, talk is cheap. Put your money where your mouth is. All of those kinds of sayings. And the Axtens do. And they're just splendid people. I really, really have a lot of respect for them. Their farm slogan is loyal to the soil, which is pretty catchy, but they live it. Okay. And so in this soil school episode, we dive into what exactly does loyal to the soil mean. Here's Derek and Tannis Axten of Minton, Saskatchewan, talking loyal to the soil.
Loyal to the soil. The reason I like is it reminds us that everything we do affects the soil, whether it's good or bad. I mean, we are a cropping system, so we are taking, but we always want to make sure we're giving back. So before any operation we do on our farm, we consider how is this going to affect the soil. Because we want to be as loyal as we can, which we end up, herbicides, there's different things that you do that aren't always benefiting the soil. But then we think, what can we do, to minimize that or to have as, less impact or destruction as possible.
So like low disturbance seeding, we try not to, when we go out there, we try not to mess up too much. We've been working on reducing inputs over time, and trying to find that balance between being productive and not having a mess and, and seeing how far we can push this, reducing the inputs. Intercropping, obviously, which has been one of the tools for reducing inputs. Oh, we've been controlled traffic now for quite a few years, trying to, same thing, it's back to the water infiltration holding capacity thing, and I'm still, we don't know, but we haven't seen downsides, but we've, it does appear to be helping soil structure. Yeah, our headlands actually, that's unfortunate downside of controlled traffic, is our headlands actually take an extra bit of beating just because of the way the nature of the beast. Because of the sort of nature of controlled traffic being square and even, and we will put pollinator strips along the edge just to sort of make up that 2 or 3 feet of whatever there is along the edge that you don't work out in even passes, and then we'll put 60 feet on the headlands for turning and access and pollinator habitat. And it's funny, we just really don't notice a difference in productivity on the fields, but it's sure it's noticeable, like the access, and when you go out and check, what you find in those strips is always good. And
using stripper headers or cutting the crop as high as we can to leave as much residue as possible. When I think of soil, back when we started farming, I thought of it as more like, it was dirt. That's how we thought of it. But since I've learned how to look at the soil under a microscope, I think of it as life and all these living creatures, and basically the soil is their home. So whether it's, keeping the soil covered, it's protecting them, or having, diverse rotation or diverse crops out at one time, it's offering them more foods so that there's more activity, more nutrient cycling. So everything we do, we just think about, how it's affecting the microorganisms' home.
Yeah, better aggregation for, air exchange and water infiltration. So all of those things. We do make a little bit of compost, and we sort of target that on specific areas. Instead of using kind of salt-based, fertilizer, we kind of use sort of biological food sort of type of approach, along with sort of a nutrient balancing program that we use. Along with our sap analysis, that's how we make our changes, is in our starter blend in the spring.
Okay, so what changes have you seen to the soil profile since we really got into this slogan?
We've seen significant changes in soil aggregation, water infiltration. So we check that. That's something that there's a way you can measure it. It's relatively simple with a ring and some water and some saran wrap. But we do that. And like in our better fields now, like the first inch is sort of 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and the second inch is 4 or 5 minutes, which, and there again, when we do get our rain, sometimes that's how it comes, and it's sometimes it's not how much rain you get, it's how much you keep. It's sort of like we talk about farming and money. It's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. And that's been a big, and obviously there's room for improvement, but that's when we try a new practice or try a new thing, we just sort of see, does it make it better, does it make it worse? That's really all we can do. This is not something that we measure down to the third decimal point. It's just, is this making it better or worse? And then we do more of that.
We spend a lot of time with a shovel and looking at the soil, and because changes are slow, actually we had a photographer here, it was a few years ago now, and we were digging in our soil. She said, well, go grab, some soil from, a piece of land that's newer to you. So we just went across the highway because we had bought that one not too long ago.
And something we had never done before.
And we compared the two. And it was unbelievable, the difference just in color alone, let alone the structure. So, it is a slow change, so we don't always see it, but definitely a change in color. We've had a good start to spring moisture, so we've seen, a lot of worms, more worms than we've ever seen on our farm.
Earthworms.
Earthworms, yeah. Yeah, they just show us that we're getting a more fully functionable soil food web.
I guess also, too, I always joke about the secret to happiness is low expectations. So the first year or two, and you're going to have disasters. And if you're not comfortable with disasters, it's just, but I live on the other end of that spectrum. If I'm not having a disaster, I'm not pushing hard enough. That's because I live by it's one crop 1 year, and I have 30 crops or 35 crops left. And we have a lot it's sort of been like, that's kind of where we think. And we have a lot to figure out in 35 crops. So, that's why we try as many things as we can each year and see where the holes are and see where the wins are and go that direction.
We don't grow the same crops every year. We don't do the same thing every year. We're totally adapting, trying new things, and it makes it a lot more exciting and fun. And sometimes it's a disaster, but a lot of times it's a big win, that's exciting.
Can you be loyal to the soil and still drive yields, but most importantly, financial profitability?
Absolutely. And I think that, it's sort of like a bell curve. I think it gets the farther you go, the better it gets, and it takes time. But yeah, I think the answer to that's absolutely you can do both. Obviously, everybody likes to talk about yield, and we've really tried to change the focus to profitability. We've made like kind of conscious choices to grow sort of, I don't want to say lower yielding, but higher value crops, and sometimes they tend to be lower yielding, just the nature of the things. But for us, it's about, if we can maximize profitability, above what we would have grown in a conventional scenario, that's still a win. And if we can do that with less inputs, and when we look at our the outcomes of like plant sap analysis and soil tests, organic matter increases and water infiltration increases, if those things can all happen and coincide.
That clip got cut a little short, but what Derek said, if you can do all of those things and they coincide, you're really you're winning at this. So really appreciate the time that I spent with Derek and Tannis Axten. Make sure you check out that Soil School episode. The video shows some great footage of their farm. There's a great the feature image of that story on our website is the two of them in a canola field where we shot that video. So I really encourage you to check that out. And once again, thanks to the Mosaic Company for being the sponsor of the Soil School. And ask yourself, how are you loyal to the soil? Maybe you've never thought of it that way, but very, very interesting stuff. I love doing those on-farm features, really finding out what drives people in their daily lives on their farm. Okay, let's take a break. We'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground. We are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
At Brett Young, we focus on what's real. It's how we became Canada's largest independent seed company. That's why we're asking a real farmer, what do you think of BY6217TF, Brett Young's TrueFlex Canola Hybrid?
What's that?
BY6217TF, Brett Young's TrueFlex Canola Hybrid with Pod Defender shatter reduction technology and Defender-rated club root and blackleg resistance.
Good yield, yeah. Probably choose it again.
Thanks, Chris. Talk to your Brett Young retailer today to see for yourself. Brett Young, distinct by design.
It's now time for the top ag news stories of the day here on RealAg Radio. Low-rate MBPT solutions claim to protect nitrogen, but no imitator product delivers like Anvil nitrogen stabilizer. The next-gen urease inhibitor from Kochia Agronomic Services. See how others stack up to the proven power of Anvil at defendyourn.ca. Okay, we've got some, I guess, more C-suite sort of news coming up here in the news. Brent Durkach has been named as the new CEO of Tannis Seeds. Durkach steps into the role as longtime CEO Dave Hansen announced his retirement earlier this year. Durkach has been with Tannis Seeds since 2001, a long time. We're actually going to have Brent on, I think, on RealAg Radio here tomorrow. I did an interview with him, and we're going to play that here tomorrow on the show. Also, like I said, we got some C-suite news. We've got a change at BSF Canada as well. So we got Oleta LaRush is set to lead BSF Canada Agricultural Solutions effective November 1st. In this role, LaRush will lead Canadian operations with the Canadian leadership team for the agriculture division at BSF and will join the company's North American leadership team. She will also continue to serve as a member of BSF Canada Board of Directors. LaRush assumes the post from Jonathan Sweat, who moves to the position of Seed Treatment North America and will be based in North Carolina. So big congratulations to Jonathan and Dave. Moving on to other things. Dave Hansen, actually, with Canterra, is right now, I should say, the CEO of 4-H Canada, so still very busy. And Jonathan Sweat, of course, moving up in the ranks at BSF in the U.S. So congratulations to both Oleta and to Brent on their new roles leading those two organizations. In other news, the federal government has rolled out its new Dairy Innovation and Investment Fund, which includes a federal commitment of up to $333 million in public funding over the next decade to help dairy processors across Canada increase processing capacity for a growing surplus of solids, non-fat. The program, which was previously announced in November of 22 and again in the federal budget in March of 23, is the final piece of compensation for producers and processors in supply management sectors for concessions the Canadian government made in trade deals over the past decade, including the Canada-EU trade agreement, the CPTPP, and the renewed Canada-US-Mexico trade agreement, better known as CUSMA or USMCA, depending on which side of the border you're on. Frustrations in the province of Saskatchewan when it comes to obviously persistent drought, but also the fact that still searching for the details on agri-recovery for this season for ranchers. Jeff Yorga, vice president with the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Association, says to RealAgriculture, this interview was actually played on RealAg on the weekend. You can download that podcast. And what Jeff talked about is how they're waiting for the federal government to finalize details on the agri-recovery disaster relief rollout for this year. Apparently, the province of Saskatchewan is ready. They are still waiting for the feds. I asked Jeff what the details of this, this pause is, and he couldn't talk about it. But I believe the details are supposed to be out mid-September. The other thing that Yorga talks about from a cattle rancher perspective in Saskatchewan is that agri-recovery is a disaster relief program. There's still this missing link of an overarching business risk management program for ranchers. And without robust, dependable BRM programs, Yorga worries for the future of the cattle industry in Saskatchewan. So some pretty significant words there from Yorga of SSGA. And in markets news, future prices for corn, soybeans, and wheat all dropped on Friday on the heels of bearish soybean supply numbers in the United States. Traders were paying close attention to old crop corn and soybean estimates as a review of the balance sheet was completed. As expected, there was revisions in average yield and production for the 22 crop. And so not what the market wanted to hear indeed. So the challenges continue to be there for this overall commodity complex. And we'll get a bit of more of an update on that on Wednesday's show when we talk to a market analyst. We have time for one more story here. This is kind of an interesting, I guess you would say, sort of like a contrarian story. We talk so much about, the economic situation and rising rates, but Americans are bucking economic trends and continue to spend amid rising rates and inflation. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Despite the economic challenges posed by rising interest rates, persistently high inflation, reduced pandemic savings, and cooling labor market, American household spending remains surprisingly robust. In August, consumers increased their spending by 5.8% compared to the previous year, significantly surpassing the less than 4% inflation rate. Notably, the experience economy, which includes activities like travel and concerts, witnessed a summer boom, according to the Journal. And and that comes in the face of the fact, have you seen what concert tickets are? It's insane. Have you been to Las Vegas? It's insane, some of those costs. So very much a contrarian play happening in the U.S. right now from a consumer standpoint. If you have any feedback on today's show, well, we'd love to hear from you. Remember, Pete's trying to find a used Redicop straw chopper. So if you do have one and you want to sell it, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms. Don't forget about the Agronomist tonight, 8 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Mountain on YouTube or at realagriculture.com/live. They're talking about seeding with a drone. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Want to thank everybody on behalf of Real Agriculture for you getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. And of course, we will talk again tomorrow with your host, Lindsay Smith. Tuesdays with Lindsay continues this month. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this episode of the RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by Economics. With one-of-a-kind tools, research, and content, Economics is farming's go-to information resource. Find it all on nutrient-economics.com or download the app.